Ready to roll.
You ready to roll?
Yeah.
All right. I'll get out my mini gavel. And we'll begin. It's Monday, February 7th of 2022. This is the Stoughton Plan Commission meeting. We do have a quorum and we have an item on the agenda, and that's the plan development specific implementation plan for the riverfront development, phase 1, buildings 1 and 2. And this would be Kurt Brink's team is here tonight. And who wants to do introductions for your team?
I'll start out. We've had a good long journey to get to here with all the interaction with the RDA, the Plan Commission, budget, finance. So we're finally here, and it's been good working with staff on the final parts to get to here. So I've got, I think John Thousand's on from OTI, Doug Hirsch and Brian Reed from
Recording in
Potter-
progress.
from Potter Lawson are on, and then Abby will be on from Saki Designs while Rebecca's trying to get a signal coming through so we don't lose that. And I think that's basically who we got on. And then Brian and Doug will take the presentation through, but we got the backup of Abby, Rebecca, and John in case there's any other questions.
All right, thank you. So go ahead, Brian or John, who wants to begin?
I can begin. Do we want to we can run through the little presentation that we kind of pulled together that was up on the screen?
That'd be awesome. I think are you able to share your screen, Brian?
I can, sure, if you want to do that.
Either way, it might be easier for you to do it that way if it works.
Okay. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, thank you everyone for reviewing this tonight with us. We're certainly excited for the project that it's moving forward and moving into the SIP phase. The SIP, I'll say the SIP phase for the project was pretty much designed cohesively and with the intent of complying with the GDP. Phase 1 that we're going to go through, SIP phase 1, was pretty much designed in concert with the GDP. So there's very little variation from what was submitted in the GDP, but we'll kind of run through where the project is at for this phase. So just a quick overview then of the GDP. The project composes, or the master plan is composed of the 8 buildings shown here, plus the potential commons building as well. The SIP phase 1 portion includes basically buildings 1 and 2, the 2 buildings adjacent to 4th Street and South Street, and then sort of in concert with the proposed public works project along Wagon Works Way. The overall number of units on phase 1 has stayed consistent with what we submitted for the GDP. So there is planned currently 78 apartment units on lot 1. There are 30 apartment units within building 1, which is on the corner. We've been referring to that as the Blacksmith building. There are 48 units in building 2, which then fronts on Wagon Works Way. Here, this just kind of highlights the areas that are shaded, highlight some variation from where we were at originally. The total site count for parking and units hasn't changed, but with some of the lot acreage and the way the building was, the lots were organized in terms of with the way that the proposed Wagon Works Way project also came in, shifted some of the CSM boundaries, not from what was submitted and reviewed, but from what the data that we had originally listed. So that's why the lot acreage here is a little bit slightly off from what we had submitted previously. Total acreage is still the same, but parking stalls are still the same for the proposed site in terms of 124 total stalls. I believe there's 84 below the two buildings in a joint shared parking structure. And then the rest would be surface stalls, basically located north of building 2. As part of the SIP development then too, we provided the breakdown of the proposed units for the bedroom. So there's 18 proposed 3-bedroom units, which is roughly 23% of the units, 29 2-bedroom units, so roughly 37%, and 31 1-bedroom units within the 2 buildings combined. The landscaping is very similar again to what was proposed with the original GDP concept. We've been working with the city forester and the other Rodney and Michael, as well as other city staffers and officials to sort of coordinate the landscaping between the private development, what is going to be potentially proposed for then the public works project under the separate project, as well as then what's occurring then in the outlots to be coordinated with the river trail project as well. We have made some adjustments to the potential proposed sizing of some of the trees that will be part of the public works project along Wagon Works Way. I guess I should jump back here. So I know one of the comments, I think, as part of the original GDP was to get some larger potential trees along the street, along Wagon Works Way. It's kind of a tongue twister. And so we're showing some larger proposed trees in that, but again, that's sort of outside the bounds of our site. And if you have questions as we kind of move through or want to come back to the landscaping, and we have Abby on board in attendance tonight to answer questions as well. But it's a similar layout where we have a lot of mixed plantings along the perimeters of the buildings. We are also showing a small outdoor terrace area here in the sort of joint space between the buildings to try to create a shared sort of common green space that can be used for some amenity space as well between the two of them. This shows building 1 or building 2, I should say, and the sort of reduced area that we have between the building and the sidewalk, but there is substantial plantings that are occurring along the building, whether there be trees, ornamental trees, or ground plantings along the perimeter and the foundations. You'll see later in some of the imagery that we have that there are some proposed retaining walls here on the east side of building 2 as well, just to help transition the grade from the lower Wagon Works Way up to the private parking below, and as well as to help with the grades for the shared parking drive entry. Building organization and building plan wise, it is still, I believe there's the 84 parking stalls within the lower level. There are 2 EV ready stalls that will be part of the project when the project is fully built and constructed. And then there are 10 additional future EV ready stalls that then will have the the building electrical system will be sized to handle those future EV stations when the need basically arises, and then they can be installed at a future time. The units again the building organization really haven't changed. So again, there's 30 proposed units in building 1 with the 48 units then in building 2. They're pretty straightforward for the most part. The majority of the units have their own outdoor balconies or terraces if they're at grade. There's a couple that do not, but then they can take advantage of the shared terrace space. On the roof plans, we've tried to group some of the proposed mechanical systems along the spine of the building, in particular along building 2, to maximize the potential area then for the photovoltaic solar arrays, so that can cover as much of building 2 in particular as we can accommodate. And then there's some small areas potentially where building 1 can also handle some future photovoltaic systems dependent upon the solar orientation and solar studies, if it dictates that. So I'll show some of the imagery of the buildings. The buildings are composed of primarily brick with some fiber cement accents. This is building 1 from the corner of South and 4th Street. Again, I think the intent with this building in particular, as well as the development as a whole, was to try and sort of create some imagery and some aesthetics that recalled the industrial nature of the site. So this being the blacksmith building, as we're referring it to, has a warm reddish orange brick that we're looking at that has quite a bit of range to it, and then has some areas of fiber cement siding on the upper floors. Let's see.
Can you just highlight the signage on that awning? Because
Sure.
that's the one point of discussion that we'll have later, and I just want to highlight that for the commissioners now, if you can.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can, let me zoom in a little bit here. You bear with me. So the thought, and this might still be a little bit hard to see, but the thought here was that we were showing some freestanding signage, some lettering above basically the entry canopy here on this building, as well as on building 2, to give them sort of identification at the main entry as to which building it is. And that would be an exception basically to the zoning. We're not in this rendering, I guess we are not identifying or not showing sort of the ground mounted sign that we have proposed here in this corner as well. But the thought with the potential ground mounted signs is that they would be more for wayfinding purposes as people are coming and going to hopefully this development, this riverfront district. And then within that, then the 2 buildings themselves might have additional signage here to sort of help identify each individual building. Zoom back. There we go. View along 4th Street. The 2 buildings, again, the 2 buildings have similar exterior palettes. In terms of the materials, the thought is that the building 1 would have, again, the reddish brick in probably more of a tumbled character, or maybe a little bit more of a weathered look to again relates to more of the sort of industrial or warehouse aesthetic that was here previously. Building 2 is thought to then be composed of, again, the fiber cement panel, but buff colored brick, so that the 2 have similar materials but don't exactly match. This view from the courtyard, this is kind of standing on the back side of building 2 looking towards building 1, so that you can see there's some outdoor green space that can be shared and occupied on by the tenants and the users. The terrace would be kind of over here behind this area. The view from building 2 from the corner of 4th Street and Wagon Works Way. Again, this building being 3 stories in height, little shorter in nature, again, just relating to the street and trying to create a nice rhythm as the windows and the balconies kind of try to break up the length of the building, with some articulation then at the main entry as well. View then of the main entry, and then again here, if I zoom in, this is and the other area that we were noting additional potential signage here on this canopy at the entry to this building as well. This is a view then from the eastern corner with the drive heading up to the parking behind. And you can see here the intent then to use some potential natural limestone or boulder retaining along this side then to accommodate some of the site grade, as well as provide access then for some of the proposed equipment, electrical and gas metering, as well as positioning one of the transformers here. The intent then is to obviously keep the grade as low and plantings low then for to be compliant with sight lines and vision triangles from this garage entry. And then another view just of the backside of building 2. There's a little bit less brick on the backside of building 2, a little bit more of the fiber cement, but it's still composition wise a similar rhythm and nature to the windows and the organization of the building. And then lastly, we just had the lighting plan here. If there were any questions, it's a little bit hard to read obviously at this scale, but the intent is to provide building mounted signage or building mounted, lights at the unit terraces and patios, some canopy mounted lights at the main entry. On the back side, in and around the parking, there would be some low bollard lights that illuminate the walkway kind of along the building and then up to building 1 as well. And then 3 pole mounted lights then to provide general lighting to the parking area in back. And then if you had any questions, these are just the examples of the lights that we had. So this is the bollard, the intent for the light poles. These I think were some of the little accent lights that we had within the development, and then some examples of the building mounted fixtures as well. And that's all that I had. If there's any questions, I mean, we're happy to run through any and answer them as needed.
All right, thank you. Are there any initial questions from commissioners? I had a couple. I guess the first one is when you're talking about the larger trees, I guess I just want to make sure that the view of the powerhouse is still there, that won't be covered by a tree as it matures. Is that something you guys thought about?
Let me go back to that plan. So right now, I think the larger, and jump in, Abby, if you have additional comments, but right now, most of the trees along there, just given the proximity of the powerhouse to the Wagon Works Way, the first sort of significant trees of note kind of happen further down the street. There is one shown here at the corner, but the rest of the space around the powerhouse is very visible.
Okay, and then kind of the other question that goes with that is that's obviously going to be a high traffic zone as far as visibility for vehicles and pedestrians and bicycles. You anticipate any issues with that?
We do not. I think the intent with the landscape design, and we've worked with, again, to coordinate as best as we can with the city on positioning of the plantings to make sure that they're not obscuring any of the sight lines or within any of the site triangles or vision triangles as you would come to any of the prominent intersections or areas that might cause, the potential for conflict.
Those particular trees in the public right of way will likely be even installed, Mayor, by our staff. We're just collaborating with them to try to facilitate the size and scale and position of some of the trees ahead of time. But ultimately, the forestry department from within plan to actually install those trees in the public right of ways.
All right, thank you. And then I guess the other question I had is, and maybe this is something you can bring later, is I'm just kind of wondering the view from the buildings toward the river, trying to get an idea of what that view is going to look like.
Sure. Yeah, we don't, I guess, and within our presentation, we don't have any views that are towards the river, but certainly, I guess we could look to work with the development to see what some of those potential views might be towards the river and towards Man Park.
Yeah, I mean, I like the layout as far as, the building facing the river. Obviously, if you're in the other side of the building, you won't have that same view. And, I guess, as people rent them out, they'll have to take that into consideration. But certainly having kind of a graphic of what that's going to look like, I think would really be helpful, because, certainly having, a higher end market rate product is, and that's, I think, part of the thought process as you laid this out. I think it would be important to highlight that.
Okay.
Good, that's a good point. And what we did when we're putting these together is buildings 1 and 2. Like you said, across from building 2 below, that's all open. And even farther down, when we were working on the overall site plan, that's why we put the community room down there to keep the long views and in the views in the future. Well, we can work on that, especially from A1 off in a distance. It looks down, interesting looking down the river. So yes, so that's why originally where the community house is, we had a bigger building there, but when we were working on the 3D modeling, was blocking some of the stuff. So that's when I went to a lower building there, and then we'll work on some of those views from those buildings for you.
Sure, that'd be great. That's really all I had to kind of kick it off. Commissioner Barman, did you have anything? I'll just go around the table here.
Mute here.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Todd. All right, well then we'll go, oh, there we go.
There we go. Problem with the mute here. No, I just wanted to say that I appreciated the presentation, and I don't have any questions.
I don't know what to make of that.
I certainly could have a comment that I actually kind of like the signs over those entranceways, and then I'll come up later in our meeting.
Sure. All right. Alderperson Caravello, did you have anything?
No, I also like the presentation. I think it looks great. Since we are on the subject of trees, and this just looking at the illustration that's on the screen right now, since I can't identify what the trees are that are going to be those 5 trees that are indicated to be along the trail there. Hopefully they are not a species that is a berry bearing tree or something that's going to drop berries or other things onto the trail.
Those trees are going to be selected by forestry, so I don't know what those trees are actually going to be.
Okay. So just whoever,
Send it on to forestry.
yep, send it on to forestry, so we're not, dropping some stuff right onto the trail. Otherwise, I think it looks great.
All right. And Alderperson Schumacher?
Like Todd had said, and Caravello also, I do like that the signage that goes over to identify the buildings individually, and I've liked the concept of these buildings from the get-go to pull the character in of the previous use on the land. I dug into some of the landscape stuff in there, and I'd say overall I'm pretty happy with the mixture and selection and that they have of a lot of the smaller shrubs and trees and other plantings and that in there. I think that'll be a great mixture for the area. And we'll wait and see what we've got for the big trees, what the idea is on those. Other than that, I didn't have any complaints or anything like that. I thought everything looked well planned out and good design.
Excellent. I don't think I missed anybody, did I?
No,
I had a question.
Al,
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sure. Did the design team incorporate SEPTED?
That's something
Fine.
we think.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something that we think about whenever we do planting design.
Okay. The only reason I asked is there was one of the architectural renderings showed some hedges near entrances that looked to be about 3 feet high or so. And from my previous experience designing Navy facilities, we always tried to keep those things down so that people couldn't crouch behind them and stuff like that. So
I think that might have been a liberty of the architectural team, but I will verify that with them.
Sure. Well, and I understand architectural renderings are, not necessarily reflective of what actually happens. So, but I was curious as to if they SEPTED principles were applied, and it looked like they were for the most part. So that was the only thing I had looking at the presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Al. Sorry I missed you. I didn't have everybody on my.
one additional question that just occurred to me.
Okay, go ahead.
So, and this came up in the readings. I've been looking at this on the plan views as well, but I guess I never asked the question. Between building 1 and 2, the paved area that's over the top of the garage that's underneath, what kind of is that, and how do you envision that space being used? Because it seems like it could potentially be incorporated into your plaza space, but it seemed pretty barren in some of the renderings.
Right, yes, so right now, let me zoom. See if one of these, I guess there's kind of falling between some of our views. Right now, the thought is that there are 2 terraces that are associated with the units. They're a little bit larger terraces that occur for 2 of the end units here. There is a change of sort of elevation between the buildings. So the roof sort of structure here is basically at grade with the adjacent landscape, so that these 2 can kind of come out, flow out, and have their terraces within that space. The rest of the space right now is shown as sort of a decorative stone accent area. So it's sort of minimally planted, I guess, to try to not currently encourage too much activity to bring too much, I guess, public activity towards those sort of private terraces. And maybe I could jump to that rendering. I guess the rendering might not show it very clearly either, but so that I guess you can kind of see it here. There's sort of one terrace closer to 4th Street, and then another one kind of shown behind these plantings, and the rest is right now sort of a decorative stone.
Okay. I will say I understand the fact that you got two units that look out on that and it's kind of their private space, but I think it might be a missed opportunity because it's kind of almost a pedestrian connector to some extent with 4th Street through there too. And it's so closely tied to your more public plaza. But I guess I can understand the privacy issue with those two units.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, anything else from Kurt's team that you wanted to cover?
Not right now.
Okay, so what are we looking for here tonight, Rodney?
So in your packet tonight actually is a resolution that the Plan Commission would take action on the SIP. The resolution is written to acknowledge their application of materials and consistency with the GDP. You'll note that we did talk about the signage that we discussed in the meeting, item E here, which really it was not part of the GDP, but we certainly think that it is very suitable for this application. Therefore, the way it's written, it is trying to approve the entire package, including those two locations for the signage on each canopy of each building. So that's included in here because that's what we're attempting to do as part of this entire SIP process. Essentially, a duplicate resolution is going to be considered by the council tomorrow night, just a council resolution thereof. Again, I thought it was a very clean review. I thought their presentation highlighted the fact that the SIP mirrored very closely the GDP submittal. And I think that was, a testament to how much work they put into the GDP. They actually understood what they're trying to accomplish. With the only minor signage question that we have here, which I think we're all generally supportive of. That's really the only area that we wanted to highlight specifically outside of the GDP.
Excellent, thank you for that. Yeah, my only other question is kind of for Kurt and, where you at on your timeline? I think we're supposed to close on the property the end of the month. And I know we've been working on things on our end in anticipation of that. And hopefully you have as well.
Yes, we're set to close on the 28th. And thank you for moving this. I think we had this originally going at the end of the month. So it was critical by us getting this all done here now. That keeps everything on track for closing. So we're all set to close on the 28th.
And I certainly appreciate, the commissioners' willingness to have this special meeting tonight in order to consider this earlier than later, which gives the council time to do their due diligence as well. So we do appreciate the commissioners giving up some extra time here. One last opportunity for questions or comments on the resolution. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion for the resolution.
I'll make the motion to recommend the SIP to council.
Okay, is there a second?
I will
Second.
second.
I think it
Pick
was
one.
Commissioner Farrell had the second. All right, last chance for discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the resolution, say aye.
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 And any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Kurt, and your team for being here tonight.
Thank you all yourself.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next item is future agenda items. Anything on our list there, Rodney?
Well, we've got a full agenda for next week. I don't think you need me to run through them. You're going to see the agenda in a couple of days, but regular agenda meeting for next week, Monday.
All right, thank you. At this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion by Barman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Caravello. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you again. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Aye.
Thank you.